Good morning, everyone. Buenos dias. Anybody have an espresso machine handy? I just want to share a little bit of background as well. Like Jan, I came to poetry sort of the long way around. Being a child of immigrants, of a working class family, the idea of a life in the arts was, we didn't sit around the table talking about Picasso or Robert Frost. And there was also a cultural divide as a Cuban family. My parents didn't even know who the Rolling Stones were, for God's sake. So there wasn't any kind of, the arts were, if we talked about arts, it was about Cuban poets or whatnot. So basically my three choices were doctor, lawyer, engineer. As I like to say, I picked the lesser of three evils, but I hope there's no doctors or lawyers out in the audience. I welcomed engineering. I've been a practicing civil engineer all my life and still am to this day. But, I didn't even read a living poet till I started my MFA program in creative writing, much less see one. And so I'm so thrilled that this program exists, that Dodge exists, because I always look back and think how different my life would have been had I come to poetry earlier. And by that, I don't mean necessarily I would have studied writing or not studied writing, but just that my life would have been enriched much sooner, that I would have sort of discovered things about myself and the world a lot sooner. And so I just want you to sort of take that in, that even if I'm sure we're not all writers in here, but the idea of appreciating poetry is not just about having to write poetry, but that it teaches us to be just good human beings or aware human beings. And that makes for a better doctor or a lawyer or engineer or whatever you choose on your path in life. To keep poetry always with you is always a good thing. As I said, I didn't start writing till I was 24 or 25, fooling around with poetry, as I like to say. And it was when I got into my MFA program, this was my very first assignment by my mentor, Campbell McGrath. And we read some Whitman and some Ginsberg, all these people I didn't know yet. And the assignment was write a poem about America. And I went home going like, dude, God, that's not my America. What the hell is Whitman talking about? So that opened the door to this obsession of what I have about, which is still obsesses my writing, which is this idea of home and place and cultural identity and how we negotiate that in our connection to place. So this was the first poem. I went home, scratched my head, and said, here goes nothing. America. Although Tia Miriam boasted she discovered at least half a dozen uses for peanut butter, topping for guava shells and syrup, butter substitute for Cuban toast, hair conditioner and relaxer, Mama never knew what to make of the monthly 5-pound jars handed out by the immigration department until my friend Jeff mentioned jelly. There was always pork, though, for every birthday and wedding, whole ones on Christmas and New Year's Eves, even on Thanksgiving Day. Pork, fried, broiled or crispy skin roasted, as well as cauldrons of black beans, fried plantain chips, and yuca con mojito. These items required a special visit to Antonio's Mercado on the corner of 8th Street, where men in guayaberas stood in Senate blaming Kennedy for everything. Ese hijo de puta. The bile of Cuban coffee and cigar residue filling the creases of their wrinkled lips, clinging to one another's lies of lost wealth, ashamed and empty as hollow trees. By 7, I had grown suspicious. We were still here. Overheard conversations about returning to Cuba had grown wistful and less frequent. I spoke English. My parents didn't. We didn't live in a 2-story house with a maid or a wood panel station wagon, nor vacation camping in Colorado. None of the girls in my family had hair of gold. None of my brothers or cousins were named Greg, Peter, or Marcia. Nope, we weren't the Brady Bunch. And none of the black and white characters on Donna Reed or the Dick Van Dyke Show were named Guadalupe, Lázaro, or Mercedes. Patty Duke's family wasn't like us either. They didn't have pork on Thanksgiving. They ate turkey with cranberry sauce. They didn't have yuca. They had yams, like the diddles of pilgrims I colored in class. So, a week before Thanksgiving, I explained to my abuelita about the Indians and the Mayflower, how Lincoln set the slaves free. I explained to my parents about the Purple Mountain's majesty, 1 if by land, 2 if by sea, the cherry tree, the Tea Party, the amber waves of grain, the masses yearning to be free, liberty and justice for all, until finally they agreed. this Thanksgiving, we would have turkey, as well as pork. Abuelita prepared the poor fowl as if committing an act of treason, faking her enthusiasm for my sake. Mama set a frozen pumpkin pie in the oven and prepared candied yams, following instructions I had to translate from the marshmallow bag. The table was arrayed with gladiolas. The plattered turkey loomed at the center on plastic silver from Woolworths. I uttered a bilingual blessing, and the turkey was passed around like a game of Russian roulette. Dry, Dioberto complained, and proceeded to drown the lean slices with pork fat drippings and cranberry jelly, esa mierda roja, as he called it. Faces fell when Mama presented her ochre pie. Pumpkin was a home remedy for ulcers, not a dessert. Tia Maria made 3 rounds of Cuban coffee, then Abuelo and Pepe cleared the living room furniture, put on a Celia Cruz LP, and the entire family began to merengue and salsa over the linoleum of our apartment, sweating rum and coffee, until they remembered it was 1970 and 46 degrees in America. Thank you. I should mention, I hope, just to give, I know we're a bit of a young audience, but the reference to Kennedy in there, just because I don't want to get in trouble with the White House, is of course the Bay of Pigs invasion. And look it up and Google it. The whole thing of the older Cuban community and their sort of position with Kennedy and historically. This is a short poem, and I chose this poem because it reminds me of the very first time that I realized that my mother was not an alien. And in this sense, the first time you sort of realize that your parents are human beings, that they're people that have been that they've had to deal with the same things you've dealt with. I mean, they're just trying to do their best. They're persons who are capable of sorrow and great joys and all the rest. And you suddenly realize there's this moment of empathy on your parents. And it might have happened already. If not, it'll probably happen fairly soon for you. And this moment came to me very quietly while watching my mother in a little Cuban grocery store. It's called Mother Picking Produce. She scratches the oranges, then smells the peel, presses an avocado just enough to judge its ripeness, polishes the Macintoshes, searching for bruises. She selects with hands that have thickened, fingers that have swollen with history around the white gold of a wedding ring she now wears as a widow. Unlike the archived photos of young, slender digits, captive around black and white orange blossoms, her spotted hands now reach into the colors. I see all the folklore of her childhood, the fields, the fruit she once picked from the very tree, the wiry roots she pulled out of the very ground. And now, among the collapsed boxes of yucca, through crumbling pyramids of golden mangoes, she moves with the same instinct and skill. This is how she survives death and her son on these humble duties that will never change, on those habits of living which keep a life alive. She holds up red grapes to ask me what I think, and what I think is this, a new poem about her. The grapes look like dusty rubies in her hands. But what I say is this, they look sweet, Mama. Thank you.
Richard Blanco.